Hello, welcome back to the channel. So with buffs actually being on the table now, there are a lot of characters that could use buffs, but who do I think deserves to be buffed the most? Well, I'm gonna go through both the 4 stars and the 5 stars and see which characters I think need them the most for both of them. Starting with the 4 stars, you could honestly pick almost any of them, especially the 1.0 ones. A lot of them are bad even back then, so they're just awful now. So the first one I'm going to pick is arguably the worst character in the whole game, being Arlan. He has really just gotten nothing. He has barely any synergy with a lot of characters. He's barely been in the story at all. He's been bad basically since the game came out. The main problem is a couple of things. One, all of his traces are awful. His A2 straight up is just counterintuitive since it heals him, but he wants to be as low as possible for his talent to be able to stack up, so you're basically just nerfing your own damage when you're at 30% HP. His A4 is arguably the worst trace in the game, since not many enemies have dots in the first place. And even if you somehow get hit by a dot, it's still just an upgraded chance, it's not guaranteed. It's why isn't it just resist all the debuffs instead of just specifically dot? I don't know. And his A6 would be good if there was a way to set your HP to 50% or lower, before a battle starts. But in all of the endgame content, you're always going to start at full HP, and in the overworld, whenever you go to a teleport, you get set to full HP. So a lot of the time, it literally just does nothing. 2, he is just way too slow and just doesn't do enough damage to make up for it. Because his skill only takes 15% of his HP, it takes so long to actually get his talent stacked up, and because of that, you need a shielder to basically make sure he doesn't die, which at least we have Dan now who is free, but still kind of limits your options. But even if you go through all of that work to get him low, his damage is still awful, because his scalings are just so bad, and oh my god bro, don't even get me started on his Eidolons, why does his E6 just make his ultimate do a bit more damage and make the AoE damage the same as the single target? That should just be how it works normally. Why is this an idol? I feel like the point of Arlan is that he's supposed to be a high-risk, high-reward character. And I think that if they were going to buff him, they should really just, up his damage. I mean, that's all he really needs. He should do, insanely high damage, but he has to be at, 1 HP in order to do it. So it would give him, a bit of a unique place as kind of a boss nuker, because he would be able to just do insane damage to bosses. But if you make the wrong move, you would just straight up die. Now, the other 4-star that I think deserves a buff the most is Yukong. She feels so close to being good, because her actual numbers are insane. An 80% attack buff on skill, as well as a 28% crit rate and 65% crit damage buff on ultimate is insane. And if any other support had that, they would be insanely broken. The problem is it's so hard to actually make the buffs work consistently and to make them line up well, since unlike most other supports, her buff takes down on every character's turn instead of just the user's turn. So you're only going to have the buff available for 2 actions max, and since her ultimate buff only activates if she has Roaring Bowstrings active on herself, it just makes her really inconsistent to actually get value out of, and very SP heavy since you need to constantly reset the buff. On top of that, her talent just feels really out of place, because it's they're trying to make her both a damage dealer and a support at the same time, but she just isn't really good at either of them. Why is it just an enhanced basic attack that just reduces more toughness? Because you're almost never going to want to use her basic attack, since you need to constantly spam her skill to actually keep the buff active, so it just feels kind of useless. I understand wanting to have some kind of limiter on these buffs, since they are really high, but if you're going to make them so high that you have to make her bad, why not just give her, lower numbers, but just make the buffs work like every other support where it only takes down on their turn? Especially since right now she is very reliant on her E6 to really work at all, since it immediately gives her 1 stack of Roaring Bowstrings, and I believe also activates her ultimate buff at the same time. Because a lot of the other times, you had to do some weird speed stuff to actually be able to have the buffs active on the characters you actually want them to be active on. She is maybe okay with Phyton, since he can, go in since in his ultimate form he, removes all the other characters. So I believe that the buff wouldn't get deactivated, but even then I'm not even sure if that's how it works. Now, moving on to 5 stars, I think the first pick is pretty obvious. It's the one that everyone says needs to get buffed. It's Seele. She's just, like, so outdated, which, I mean, makes sense because she was the first 5-star to get released, but, like, Archer just does what Seele wants to, but just way better. Like, he's more consistent, he does way higher damage, he's a lot more synergy with other characters. Like, the problems are a couple of things. One, like most early characters, her traces suck. Like, her A4 is good because it just makes her do more damage, but her A6 feels kind of useless because you mainly want to just spam her skill and ultimate, and like, you don't really want to use her basic attack almost ever unless you just run out of SP. So I feel like it should at least work on her skill as well as her basic attack, and her A2 is just, it's so bad. Like, it only activates at 50% HP, which you're not going to stay there a lot of the time unless you're just using a shield or something, but even then, if you're getting to 50% HP with a shield, you're probably doing something wrong. And it's only a chance to not be attacked, which a lot of the time, it's just not going to do anything. 2, she just feels really underwhelming to use, since she doesn't really do that much. All she really does is just damage, especially since you can only activate Resurgence once. Like, and if Archer can attack multiple times with his skill, I feel like Seele should be able to activate Resurgence as long as she kills an enemy. Maybe just, like, don't let the buff stack, since the 80% damage buff on every kill might be a bit too good. Or if you want to let it stack, maybe just nerf the buff. 3, her Eidolons are also pretty mediocre. Like, they aren't awful. They're just kind of boring and don't really solve her problems. Like, oh, they're just like, oh, she gets more speed. Or, oh, she does a bit more damage. And, like, that's it. I feel like they should do a lot more than that. Like, the only one that really does something is her E6. And even then, I feel like her E6 is kind of weird. It doesn't really help her actually do what she wants to do. Now, for the last character, I think it is a pretty obvious one. It's Yanqing. He has been just the worst 5-star since the game came out, mainly because of just how Soul Steel Sync works. Since if you get hit at all, at least without a shield, it deactivates the buff. So, like Arlan, you're basically forced to run him with a shielder if you want to actually have uptime on the buffs. But I feel like it makes way less sense for Yanqing, at least with Arlan. The whole idea is for him to get low HP, so you can't really make him work with healers. But for Yanqing, the buffs, I feel, isn't so big that it needs a limiter like this. So I would say either just get rid of the limiter altogether, or at least make the buff only deactivate at 50% HP instead of whenever he gets hit, so he can at least work with healers. On top of that, his talent's follow-up is super RNG reliant, since it only activates 60% of the time, which, like, I don't really understand. Why would you not just have it at 100%? And on top of that, it's only a 65% chance to freeze, which maybe that's okay because freeze is kind of broken as a mechanic, but still it just feels kind of bad because if it at least did some damage, I could maybe see why, but it still only does like 50% of his attack, which is barely anything. His traces are okay. His A2, I do think, is good, but I feel like it should activate just when Soul Steel Sync is active, instead of you having to attack an Ice Weak enemy, since you might not always be using him against an Ice Weak enemy, since he mainly just wants to nuke enemies instead of trying to break them. His A6 is just good, but his A4 just doesn't make any sense, especially with how his kit works right now, because since Soul Steel Sync deactivates whenever you get hit, you're only going to be getting the effect res for one single hit, and then it just does nothing. So it's just so confusing. Like, why did they make this like this? Now, there are definitely other characters you could say, deserve buffs as well, like Welt or Bailu, but I feel like these are the ones I think are in, like, dire need of buffs. But, like, there is a lot of characters that I do think could use buffs, and I do hope that they do announce buffs soon, because I feel like if they don't announce buffs in the next live stream, I think people are going to be really annoyed, and just the current rate that they're doing them is way too slow with how many characters I think need them, and just with how many more characters are coming out, so the Power Grid realm is just getting worse and worse. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.